Hello, everybody. Here we are, and here we go again. All right. Welcome back to another episode of Shoot the Hoot RAW. I'm Chuck from Cyberhoot, and today I'm talking about a real story that came out of the IT community. A story about a veteran sysadmin, nearly 30 years in IT, 17 years of keeping systems patched, on schedule, I might add, and a person who spent decades doing the work that keeps the business running. And then one simulated phishing email, one click, and suddenly the conversation became, is this a coaching moment or a career-ending mistake? Now, before we go any further, this isn't about throwing someone under the bus. And honestly, I don't even know this guy's fate. Either way, we're keeping the person anonymous because this isn't a story about embarrassing someone. No, we don't do that as Cyberhoot, right? But it's a story about asking a much bigger question. What does a mature security program actually do when a good person makes a mistake? Because let's be honest, people make mistakes. Admins make mistakes. Security professionals make mistakes. I once deleted all my team's evidence they collected on my very first breach investigation. Ouch. But the good news was all was recoverable except one person's evidence, my boss. He wasn't happy. I don't think he ever got over it. How do I know? Let's just say he showed me over the next 2 years that he was my boss, and he just wasn't happy. And listen, dude, it was an accident, Tom. Tom, it was an accident. I swear, I didn't mean to do it. And oh, by the way, you should have your evidence backed up anyway. Anyways, but I digress. So, where was I? Oh, so when a phishing mistake happens, the question isn't, did someone click? The better question is, what did we learn? And what happens next? So today we're going to talk about accountability, phishing simulations, IT expectations, and where the line should be drawn, a mistake, a pattern, and misconduct. Because security isn't about finding someone to blame. It's about reducing risk before the bad guys find the weakness for us. So grab your coffee, keep your admin privileges closed, and let's get into it. 30 years in IT, one Phish, now what? This is Shoot the Hoot RAW, unscripted, unfiltered, and unapologetically Cyberhoot. Let's go. All right, let's start with the big question. How much weight should one moment carry? Because we look at this story, the numbers are pretty interesting. On one side, you got 30 years in IT, 3 decades of solving problems, keeping systems running, putting out fires, and probably explaining to people why turning something off and back on again is actually a legitimate troubleshooting technique. 17 years of consistent patching, that matters. But then on the other side, you got this one simulated phishing clip. Now, let me be clear. Experience does not make someone immune to mistakes. The best security people in the world can get fooled. Attackers are not sending you those Nigerian prince needs help moving money emails anymore, right? They're crafting believable messages using real information and creating pressure. So yes, a click can definitely matter, especially when we're talking about someone with elevated privileges. But here's where mature security programs have to slow down a bit. A security metric without context is just a number wearing a tie. And numbers without context can tell a very incomplete story. So the question shouldn't just be, did they click? The better questions are, was this the first time? Were they trained? Did they understand what they missed? Did they report it? Did their behavior improve afterwards? And are we looking at a pattern or a single mistake? Because there's a huge difference between somebody made a mistake and someone repeatedly ignored security expectations. Different story there. Those are not the same thing. A mature security program doesn't ignore mistakes. It learns from them. It uses them as data. It finds where the process, the training, the technology needs to improve. Because the goal isn't to prove someone failed. The goal is to make sure the next attempt from an attacker fails. So this slide's hoot rule is pretty simple. You have to measure the person's security behavior, not just the moment they got caught. So this is where the conversation gets a little uncomfortable because there's a very, very important difference between a security program and a liability program. So sometimes from the outside, they can look exactly the same. Both might have training, phishing tests, reports, metrics, dashboards, right? But the question is, what happens when someone fails? A security program says, interesting, we found a weakness. How do we make this person and the organization more resilient? A liability program says, great, we documented that they were warned. And those are two very different mindsets, right? So now, let me be clear. Accountability matters. Not off the hook. Accountability certainly matters. If someone has privileged access, ignores security policies, repeatedly makes risky decisions, and refuses coaching, yes, there should and needs to be 100% accountability there. But if the entire process of a phishing simulation becomes catching people, congratulations, you've built the world's most expensive security trap. The goal of phishing simulations should not be who failed, right? The goal should be what can we improve before a real attacker tries this? Because here's the danger. If employees believe every mistake is going to become a punishment event, what happens next? You know what they do? They stop reporting. They hide their mistakes. They avoid admitting when something happened. And that's exactly what attackers want. A strong security culture is not built by making people afraid of being wrong. It's built by making people comfortable saying, hey, I think I clicked something I shouldn't have. Can someone help me out? That moment of honesty might save the company. So yes, test people. Yes, measure behavior. Yes, hold people accountable. But never forget the purpose. Purpose is not to build a better evidence folder. The purpose is to build a safer organization. So this slide's hoot rule. If the program protects the paperwork better than the people, might be time to rethink that program. All right, now let's bring some balance to the conversation. Because this is not a story about saying nobody should ever be held accountable. That's not realistic. Security matters, risk matters. And when someone has elevated access, the stakes are even higher. A sysadmin who has admin privileges clicking a malicious link can create a very, very different risk profile than someone who has access to their email and nothing else. That matters. But here's the key. Though accountability matters, so does proportionality. Those two things have to live together. A mature security program should look something like this. First mistake, coach. Figure out what happened. Was there training evidence, right? Was the attack realistic? Did they understand what they missed? But maybe there's a pattern of this. Repeated risky behavior much? I don't know. Now we move from coaching into focused intervention, more training, more support, more conversations. But listen, after all that, if somebody repeatedly ignores security expectations after meaningful coaching, now we're having a little different conversation. And if someone knowingly violates policy or intentionally creates risk, that's where accountability belongs, right? So the problem is when organizations skip all those steps and jump straight to, you failed the test, here's the consequence. Because that's easy. It's easy to punish a moment. It's much harder to understand the behavior behind it. And here's a phrase I think is important. Higher standards do not automatically mean zero tolerance, right? Zero tolerance sounds tough. Tough, zero tolerance, we won't do zero tolerance, right? No, it sounds like leadership, but sometimes it's just lazy risk management. Because the goal isn't to find someone who made a mistake. The goal is to reduce the chance that the mistake happens again. That, my friends, requires understanding. It requires coaching. And sometimes, yes, that requires consequences. But consequences, they should be based on patterns, not panic. Because one data point really tells the whole story. So our hoot rule here is simple. You escalate the patterns. You don't panic over single data points. All right, so I know it's a lot there. I'm getting a little animated here. I feel my blood pressure going up. So let's pause a second. We just spent the last few minutes talking about accountability. So it's only fair we hold our nerds accountable too. Let's see what they've shipped this week, what they fixed, what they broke before they fixed it. So it's time for our nerd update. But first, here we go. You guys know what's coming. For our banner here, boom. Right? Be the first to type OnePhish10 to shootthehoot@cyber.com and get 10% off your next invoice. Type it in, click send, and get that 10. And if you're watching this live, no worries. Email us anyway. I may just give you the 10% off. I'm a nice guy like that. The only catch is, you got it. It's limited to just one discount per month. All right, our nerd update. This week's theme is pretty simple. Less hunting, less clicking, less frustration, more hoot. First up, finding things got easier. We added a more powerful search capabilities inside of Autopilot. Because nobody enjoys playing the classic IT game of, hey, where did that thing go? I can't find it, right? You can now search across pages, tenants, and users much more easily. So basically, we gave Autopilot a better memory, which is great because sometimes even the humans using the platform need a little help remembering where they put things, right? Next, better visibility for our auditors. You guys have been asking, we've been listening, and we've been delivering, right? For organizations that need compliance oversight, we added improved auditor capabilities. Auditors can now have read-only access to compliance information without needing the keys to the entire kingdom. So that's important because an auditor needs visibility. They don't need the ability to accidentally rearrange the furniture, right? Dark web improvements. Yes, we also made improvements around dark web exposure management. Organizations can now control whether weekly exposure emails go out and give users more flexibility around those notifications. And when reviewing these exposures, teams can acknowledge multiple items more easily. Because trust me, nobody wants to click through 500 individual alerts one at a time acknowledging. That's not security. That's more of a punishment disguised as workflow. All right. MSP and partner improvements. Whoa, we keep going. I'm taking a sip here. It's getting thirsty. All right. MSP and partner improvements. We also cleaned up some partner experience items. So integration pages are smoother. Company setup is easier. And creating a new company tenant now is a simpler onboarding workflow, right? The goal is to bring customers into CyberHoot and Autopilot feel less like a software migration project, more like click, connect, let's go, right? Group and user management also got some updates. Man, is it me or are these updates getting more voluminous, right? Wow, voluminous, big word. Anyways, we improved CSV uploads and bulk user actions, so managing groups is easier now. Because when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of users, nobody wants to manually babysit every single account. Sometimes automation is not fancy. Sometimes it's just having someone it's just saving someone from needing another cup of coffee to doing more work. Let's help them out. And of course, some behind the scenes improvements. This is the stuff partners will never notice, may never notice, which is actually kind of the best kind of compliment. We improved performance, tightened up security around sensitive actions, fixed some background processing issues, and made Phish more resilient. Translation, things should be faster, things should be safer, and things should break less. That's the dream. So, big picture this week. We made Autopilot easier to navigate, easier to manage, easier to audit, and easier for partners to scale. So the nerds keep turning those knobs, tightening those screws, and occasionally yelling, the database until it behaves, right? Because behind every simple button is usually a nerd somewhere saying, don't worry, I got this. And that, my friends, is your nerd update. So we talked about the story, the lessons, and the improvements we're making behind the scenes. Now let's tackle the questions that don't always have easy answers. It's time for our open mic Q&A. Okay, let's get into the questions everyone's probably thinking. So if in the meantime, throw some questions in the chat. As always, I always come prepared, right? So throw your questions in the chat. No worries, I have some anyway, right? Because this is where things get interesting. And I love these conversations because cybersecurity is rarely a black and white thing. It's usually about finding the line between we need accountability and we need to remember we're dealing with humans. So I'll start with the questions that everyone typically asks, right? So first question, let me pull up my questions here. Boom. First question I have in the queue for us. Boom. Should a sysadmin face consequences for failing a phishing simulation? I know that guy with 30 years of experience is listening. Listening. The answer is potentially. Potentially, yes. And I know that's not a spicy yes or no answer that people typically want, right? But potentially, because security maturity lives in the details of things. We have to ask, was this his first mistake? Did he receive his training? Was the simulation realistic? Did he understand what happened? Did he improve afterwards, right? So a single click tells us something, but it doesn't tell us everything. A mature organization doesn't look at one event and immediately say, case closed, we found the problem. No, not at all. Sometimes the click is the problem. Sometimes the process around the click is the problem. Sometimes the training is the problem. You have to look at the details, right? So potentially, yeah, potentially. Question 2. Should IT employees be held to a higher standard? Yes, absolutely yes. And here's why. More privilege means more potential impact. If someone has administrator access, they're not just protecting their own mailbox anymore. They may have the keys to the entire kingdom. And unfortunately, attackers love keys. Attackers don't usually break down the front door if they can convince someone with a key to open it for them. But, and this is the most important part, higher standards do not mean humans stop being human, right? IT professionals are still people. They get busy, they get distracted, they get fooled. Like I always say, humans are going to human, right? The goal isn't to pretend mistakes won't happen. The goal is to make sure mistakes become learning opportunities instead of repeating events. All right. Third question here. Boom. When should phishing failures become an HR issue? So this is where patterns matter. A single mistake, that's just usually just a coaching conversation. Have a conversation with the employee. But repeated risky behavior after training, support, and clear expectations, Now that's a different discussion. Someone knowingly ignoring the policy, don't like that. That moves into accountability. The mistake organizations make is treating every situation like the final step. Everything becomes click equals discipline. No, the security program understands there's a difference between a mistake, a pattern, and misconduct. Those are three completely different things. And other questions like that, these are three things you have to look at, right? Boom, where are we? All right, let's see what we got here. Questions in the chat. Let's see. Let's see here. I got one here. Do you think IT members and upper management, higher upper employees should have different trainings from your average employee? Yes, absolutely. Great question. Appreciate that question. So first of all, let me turn off this other question here. All right. So I'm going to repeat the question again. Do you think IT members and upper management, higher up employees should have different trainings from your average employee? Absolutely, they should. Right now, you look at cyber, what we provide. We provide our general cybersecurity training, right? That everyone needs to take, no doubt about that. But people with more privilege, more access, different roles, role-based training, much absolutely, right? And that's what cyber is building right now. Kid you not, we are currently building our role-based training. So glad you asked that question. And yes, IT members, upper management, people like that, yes, absolutely need to have different training because guess what? Your responsibilities are different. An attacker will come at you differently than they'll come at a standard employee. Maybe some of the things will be the same, but some of the things are going to be different, right? For example, you send one of my guys an attack that says, "Hey, pay, go out and buy, 100 gift cards and do it this way." They don't have the access to do that. It's not going to happen. It's a waste of time, right? So I can train them on that, but why? It'll never apply to them. But you can send that same email to our finance person, or you do a deep fake against our finance person, they might go, "Hey, Chuck took care of it." Care of what? I didn't ask for anything. So absolutely, you got to have different training based on different levels, and Cyber is currently building that now. I can't even begin to tell you all the incredibly exciting things that we're building with Cyber Autopilot right now. I'm excited. It's going to be an exciting year. I kid you not. Anxious for it. So great question. Thank you. All right. I think that's all the questions for now. Let's go back to the banners here. Boom. Let's go to the next thing. Where did we leave off? Oh, that was it. And now we're wrapping this up. Thanks again for the question and the ones that we already had in the queue for you guys, right? So let's bring this story back to where we started. A veteran sysadmin, nearly 30 years in IT, 17 years of doing a critical part of the job the right way, keeping systems updated, keeping things running, doing the work that most people only notice when it goes wrong. And then one simulated phishing email and one clicked. Man, now that changes things. Now, maybe it was a bad decision. Maybe there was a lesson to learn there. But here's the bigger question. What does your organization do with that information? Because there are two very different reactions. The first one, gotcha, you documented failure. That feels productive. Hey, it creates a record. It checks the box. But did it actually make the organization safer? Or did we just create a really nice folder proving somebody made a mistake? Great, there's our folder of mistakes. There you are, gotcha, right? The second reaction, much different. We found a weakness, let's understand it, and let's reduce the risk. Now, that's where security maturity starts, because the goal of phishing simulation was never supposed to be catching people. The goal was to find the cracks before a real attacker finds them. And here's the thing, experienced people make mistakes. Security professionals make mistakes. Admins make mistakes. Humans make mistakes. Hell, my dog makes a mistake when he pees on the carpet. The question isn't whether mistakes happen. The question is, what do we do next? Do we create fear or do we create improvement? Do we make people afraid to admit mistakes or do we build a culture where someone can say, "Hey, I did something weird. Can you help me out?" The second response is where organizations get stronger. Now, we don't know the guy's fate or every detail of this situation. We don't know the company's policies. We don't know the full history. And that's actually why this story is valuable, because it forces us to ask the bigger question. What should a mature security program understand before turning one simulated click into a career decision? The story arc is pretty simple. You have a veteran, you got a click, you got the backlash from it, the bigger question, and the better program. And that's the lesson, right? Now, that phishing, it's not that phishing tests are bad. Not that accountability is wrong, but that good security culture and good security requires judgment, right? So the final hoot rule for this episode, just take away from this, you have to judge patterns, you have to coach the mistakes, and escalate the behavior. Whew, man, I'm tired. It's time for me to roll out. So I'm Chuck from Cyber Hoot. It's been a joy sharing this conversation with you guys today. Please share this episode with others who are missing the mark just a little bit. Until next time, I want you guys to laugh, I want you to learn, and I want you to, of course, hoot up. Hoot up!